We're alive because we feel alive. Hey, everybody. It's Thursday. It's Thirsty Thursday, I think. I have got myself, oh, geez, for the love of Pete. I've got my hug mug right in front of me. We're going to be talking a little Rosalynn Carter today. I felt the need to really kind of come on to this. You know, well, I've also got some tarot. We'll play a little tarot today. I got a new camera angle. Hope you kind of like it. Put it right in front of the nozzle. Woo! My computer's talking to me. Should probably turn that off, huh? You are now live. Okay. You know, you're still alive. By the way, thank you so much for those of you that have taken a look to see if I had done it. There's a backstory to this, and I'll tell it really briefly. I spent a lot of time and effort, and I wanted to come out a couple of days before Halloween. And I had a whole T-shirt says, "I can't ghost a medium. You can't ghost a medium," which is still one of my favorite lines ever. And because people in this business are just D-bags sometimes. And I spent a lot of time on the movie Ghost, the Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Whoopi Goldberg hit from 1990. It was a high-grossing film. I spent a lot of time, did a lot of whatever. And then when I put it up, it got blocked because Sony BMG doesn't allow any parts of that movie to be done. Now, some of this is me being kind of foolish and going, Brandon, you should kind of test it out. So I will not be doing these things unless I get a good tester out there and then people make some comments. I mean, some of it's for the reaction. You know, I can't deny the game, but I will say if it gets blocked out, it got demonetized when I did that because I can't capitalize on the money's going to go to the people that own the rights for It's a Wonderful Life, which is I'm totally cool with, like 100% cool with that. Like you create incredible content like that and you should be able to kind of do that. But yeah, the want to get back into doing these style videos. They're kind of quick for me to pull together. I've got support staff, I've got things, in place, and whenever available, then we'll be able to kind of like work from it and, do what we need to do. But I'm also kind of discovering that if you haven't gotten onto my website, and I know I'm a little crooked here. I'll straighten her out a little bit here. Don't get seasick on me. Whoa! Here we go. Everybody, hands and feet inside the railing here. I see what's going on. I'm so old-fashioned with this. I really am. Anyways, if you haven't gone over to tbrandonruss.com, I highly recommend that you do get on my email list. By the way, I've had over 500 of you add yourself to that website in the past month since it's become available. I want to thank you guys for doing that. I am getting out of a lot of the multiple outlays for that. Like I'm not having 5 different things doing 5 different functions. I'm having one function. I'm having 5 different functions in one place. That way I don't have to rebrand the whatevers, right? Like I don't have to recreate the wheel. So if you haven't signed up for my email stuff, please do. I've got a special going on right now. Go ahead and take a look at it. I'll bring it up again. I also do a weekly class called the Weekly Bee, which is also part of, I thought I turned you off. But it's basically a weekly class where I have multiple things go on in each one of the classes. So sorry, everything's turned off now. Where in the class every week I go over the weekly astrology. It's not a full astrology report. It's actually meant to be bite-sized. So you get one aspect that you can pay attention to and focus in on the energy so you can start to internalize astrology. And then I talk about a couple of tarot cards every week, usually something connected to the date and then the archetype. And then we kind of have a little bit of a wild card section. Either we talk about a spirit animal or an archangel. I'm wearing my Sandalphon shirt. I forgot I put this on. I actually forgot that I had this in my repertoire, if you will. Sandalphon, great sigil or sigil. I don't know. I've heard it pronounced like multiple ways, and then I've never been corrected whichever way it is that I've said it. Oh my gosh, you can totally get nose hair on this one. We're working on the camera angle, everybody. Anyways, I do feel the need to put some Christmas lights up behind me though for the "It's a Wonderful Life." I have so many stories to tell about this. I used to participate. And when I say used to, I did it once. Participate in "It's a Wonderful Life" event, um, and I can't do it because I have these torn ligaments and I just can't walk. I certainly can't run, and not that it was very fast. I mean, I would respectfully. This time last year, I was in a turkey trot. I came in second to last of, like 900 participants. The 82-year-old that I beat out, I got her by a full 5 seconds. I'm not proud of it, but I'm proud of it, right? The It's a Wonderful Life run happens out in Western New York. It is a sight to behold. It is where they shot Bedford Falls. It is a place called Cayuga Falls, I think. Double checking that. And it's a wonderful experience. And I've always had an attachment and a fondness to that story, to um, that entire genre, if you will, of innocence yet challenging our own place in the universe. So I think it's really kind of cool. But I would be remiss if I didn't back up a little bit and talk about Rosalynn Carter. Time and space into this. I've been pretty busy with the coaching stuff. I've been pretty busy with the teaching and the travel and that sort of thing. I've got some announcements coming up next year. I've got a couple of things. If you guys are local, again, go to the website tbrandonruss.com. If you're local in upstate New York, I have a Christmas show coming up. It's a lot of fun. I also clean out the closet in the shop. I bring a whole bunch of stuff. Everybody walks out with something. I shouldn't say everybody. If I don't like you, you're not getting anything. But I will give you coal. But what is coal? I mean, getting coal right now with the price of heat might be worth it. They would have crushed your time. If you were chasing that 2-year-old, they would have crushed your time. I think I know what you're talking about. But yeah, tbrandonruss.com. I'm going to be at the Green Island Bowling and Banquet Center. It's a really cool place. Old friends of mine own it. Had a great time this past week up in Sacandaga, which is right at the base of the Adirondacks. Those of you keep trying to keep track at home. Always a sold out show. We had 65 plus people up there. It was a beautiful night. I mean, it started to rain like mad, but it's kind of a fun Magical Mermaid. Yes. 82, like I said, not proud, but if you're gonna be the best. So I was really looking forward to just demolishing that time this year, and the leg and the foot and anyways. But I got a plan. We'll figure it out. On the other side of it, being able to kind of become centralized, and you guys have probably noticed, just fewer videos out there. I've been really dismayed by the demonetization platform of YouTube. And at one time I was like, oh, if I just build up things and I can build up plenty of content and whatever, that'll be really cool. I can do this for a living. And then I saw them be able to take away people at the drop of a hat. I'm not justifying anything that the Russell brand is or does or anything else, but he certainly has owned his path. I got to give him that credit. I just think it's really disturbing that they could turn it off overnight when that's what you rely on. And when you do this work and you grow and you get bigger, it's fiscally irresponsible if you don't have other ways to kind of do what you do, right? So that's why if I own my website, they can play around with it, I guess. But I now look at YouTube as kind of more of not necessarily as a monetization platform, which is kind of good news for everybody. But it's also the idea that it's really kind of to get you back to my website, treat it like a funnel for those of you that are into the business side of it, and bring people there. And that's where I house things like my weekly bee. That is where I have things like my tarot classes. That is where I have my mediumship mentor group that meets. And that's my main source of communication. It's my main source of also connection and advertising. And I do have those of you that are across the country that really would like to kind of see me do this in a live setting where I'm doing, pure mediumship. I may pull out some tarot a little bit too, but and I always pull out astrology. I have a good time. If you've been to any of these things, when I get going and I get connected with spirit, it's just a good time. I actually have a circle a week from today. It's an online circle. There's 4 or 5 tickets left. Jump into that, tbrandonruss.com, scroll halfway down on the page. You'll see all the events. You'll see the Christmas special. You'll see the online. And then I've got Louisville already posted. I've got some things. I don't want to say it. I don't want to jinx it, but it's in Florida and it's at a spiritual center. I've been asked to participate in some things down there. I have been asked to participate in some things across the country. I just need to cross some T's and dot some I's. I have learned those lessons, everybody. I have learned those lessons. Hey, Marnie, how are you? Kelly, good to see you. Magical Mermaid. So we're gonna we're gonna dive in here. Yeah, without further ado, what I can do. Here we go. Oh my gosh. So I added Jimmy's face onto that because, first of all, let's talk about being a power couple. People ask me all the time, what's a soulmate? How do they look? What are they? Whatever. You can really pinpoint within a few degrees who is a good influence for you and who isn't, right? Is there a lot of trine energy? Is there properly placed squares, right? And I originally thought, okay, I'm going to do a chart on Rosalynn. And the more that I looked at it, the more I thought, and I looked at the things that she was known for, famous for, whatever. And she really took on mental health with her first ladydom. When you look at people like Jackie O and whatever, and she was like a fashion template, and that was really kind of spoke to the mid 60s, early 60s time. Lady Bird Johnson was very much just an old battle axe about things. When Jimmy Carter came around, he was, of course, Nixon, whatever. By the time Rosalynn Carter came around, you've had Betty Ford making her, medical, thing going, and addiction was becoming more and more of an issue. Well, the addiction was such an issue because of what was going on with Vietnam and the fact that, the 60s were really kind of pushing it. And we didn't have good things in place like, good support services. I mean, when you really think about it, there's the part of it that I think, people have kind of had a challenge, or I should say, first ladies tend to answer the call of what the problems have been. Can anybody actually answer? You had Nancy Reagan, who was about, the drugs. You had Betty Ford, which was about recovery. You had Rosalynn Carter, which was about mental health, and then later on homelessness. She kind of coincided those two things hand in hand. You had Nancy Reagan that was, just say no to drugs, which, okay. You had, by the time George Bush was in office, Barbara Bush was about literacy. Hillary Clinton was about herself. Sorry, guys. Hillary Clinton was really about equality. I mean, she really kind of pushed that agenda. She pushed not only the, no child left behind piece of it, but I also think that she was trying to like map her way for how do I kind of play this game in the role that I was in. And she's held several different roles. She was Secretary of State. She, ran for president multiple times. There were things that, and she was a senator. So there were things where she was always trying to fit the role. So I think that hers was a little disingenuous in terms of like whether she was really for the children or not. And again, this is my opinion, but when you see somebody like Rosalynn Carter, who was flat out, down and out, direct towards what she wanted to do and who she wanted to be. And if there is one thing that I'm going to point out in their chart here. Oh, by the way, I also have a special going on with the gift certificate. Get it for $225 and you get a full reading, you get a code with it. But one of the things about their charts that I really want to take a look at is how matched they were as a couple. And the way that this is a category called synastry, where you take two charts and you put them one on top of the other. Now, the inner wheel is the yield. In other words, the inner yield is the pace setter. So what you're seeing here is Rosalynn Carter's chart on the inside and then Jimmy Carter's on the outside. And the way that you interpret it is Jimmy Carter was influencing Rosalynn Carter in this way. We are going to look at it the other way as well, but let's take a look at what Jimmy Carter provided to Rosalynn, right? So right out of the gate, you can't help but notice, and just we're going to stick with Rosalynn for 30 seconds here. She's highly intuitive because she has Neptune, right? Neptune in conjunct with the sun. This is somebody that is able to dream big, and she was either going to fly high with the 12th house, or she was going to fall flat on her face. I'm going to say she was able to fly high. She also was highly motivated, and she knew how to be a very good she knew how to really kind of create the lexicon of the balance of male and female energy. She is a Virgo rising, right? She is a Leo with a Virgo rising, and her moon is in Taurus. So just we'll get to her moon here in a second, but that combination makes somebody needing to be very loyal to them, right? It also means that there's a lot of loyalty about them. You know, you're going fire, earth, earth. And in this combination, and the fact that the sun is so close, it's almost in conjunct. It's not quite. Neptune, you can make the argument that it's conjunct to the rising. But there is that combination makes somebody that's going to make dreams come true. She's going to go until she can't go anymore. She's going to drive it the way she needs it to. That Mars, Lilith, Venus stellium there in her first house in Virgo makes her very much about the right thing. She's also very role driven. So as much as they're progressive, they're very much of like, I'm going to be the woman, you're going to be the man, right? But she's also very healing. So there is the sense that maybe she was a little bit of the mother figure for Jimmy, which kind of makes sense, you know, based on his personality. And then you also have, she has Uranus and Jupiter in conjunct in the 8th house. This, I'm going to say this, she might have worn the pants in the bedroom. She might have been somebody that, and in Aries, but she's also somebody that kind of is a little bit of a power broker. So for her to marry up makes a lot of sense. I mean, he is just a simple peanut farmer. I will end up sounding like Forrest Gump if I try and do a Jimmy Carter, but his influence or her let me talk about her stability before I talk about his influence. Her stability in this is that what she's going to bring to the table with Uranus in the 8th house, with Jupiter in conjunct, and it's a full conjunct, makes it a very powerful placement, right? So she's going to be driven to figure out how to make things go their way using other people's money, being able to use influences in other different ways where she doesn't have to do all the work. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It makes you an incredibly good fundraiser. It also makes you someone that can see the trees through the forest. There's a boatload of positive here. Boatload. We're going to pay attention more to the nodes here when we look at Rosalynn's influence here to where Jimmy is, because that's you're going to see some stuff really kind of fly a little bit with that, and I hope you're going to smile with it. But I also enjoy the idea that the Chiron and the moon are in conjunct here in Rosalynn's chart. Now, what that means to me is that she is a natural healer. She's also somebody that's going to be incredibly curious about how to make people feel better. Chiron has a lot of mental aspects to it. This is part of the reason why she understands mental health. You have the moon and Chiron, again, near full conjunct in the 9th house. So you have this education house along with Chiron and the moon. So she's going to naturally want to kind of learn how to emotionally balance. She's going to want to explore the idea of being able to get out there. She's actually going to encourage activity. She's going to encourage exploration, right? So there's a lot of this um, where it is that there is a feeling that she can really truly kind of be I don't want to say power broker in this, but she could be somebody that is going to have a high level of empathy and have a mastery. Let's use the word mastery here, of being able to walk the walk and talk the talk when she's talking about mental health, right? I think that's a very fair thing when you look at her ninth house. Now, when you influence here where Jimmy is in all of this, um, they almost kind of have like a staggered, thing here, but there's kind of hey, I'm going to look at you across the room. Their moons are in opposition, right? So there was going to be something naturally curious for Jimmy about Rosalynn, something kind of mystical almost in a way, right? They are near full opposition here, which is kind of cool when you think about it. And by the way, opposites do attract when it comes to the moon. Opposites they just behave a little bit differently. But the fact that Jimmy's moon is in her third house, he said all the right things to her baby. You know what that is. Kind of like, hey, I need to get the peanuts out. And she'll be like, oh, Jimmy. She'll be like, how many peanuts? Anyways, I said peanuts, YouTube. I said peanuts. So there's that influence there, right? Where that's kind of that attraction. Now, the other part of this is that, Neptune only moves so far, but the North Node is in conjunct with Jupiter, or with Neptune rather, and it is sitting near full conjunct to what they have going on, which is what she has going on with the Sun and Neptune in the 12th house. So the North Node shows up here, and it's pretty glorious because the North Node is in conjunct with Venus. By the way, when you see that, you are screaming like, hey, I'm going to make your dreams come true, baby. They're going to talk about stuff like that, right? They're going to talk about things like, I want to be able to create a safe space. Jimmy was a very safe space. And since it's in the 12th house, he probably promised her the world, and she probably reciprocated by saying, okay, I'll do that. By the way, he's also really good at communicating. So there could have been where she might have been a mother figure. His father figure comes in. He was a man of his word to her. He never even looked at anybody else's rose garden. You know what I'm saying? Because Mercury is a dead on accurate to her Lilith. He would never do anything to hurt her. That it's in their chart, right? Splits the upright and, becomes a conjunct of both Mars and Venus, but of course, Lilith sitting there in the first house. So these two were very principled. So when you saw them hand holding, there was no BS here. There was it was genuine. There was a genuine love. There was a genuine concern. There was a genuine connection. There is also the idea where Jimmy empowered. It's a wide conjunct, but I'm going to count it here. Where, oh wow, this is kind of cool. His Pluto has a square. It's a wide square. It's probably a quincunx here, but this is with her Uranus Jupiter in conjunct, right, in the 8th house. So there is some major influence where she would be empowered by him to be a little different. They were okay with kind of, and by the way, they're still super conservative. Don't think their rebellion was whatever, but there was a counterculture in the 70s to be conservative, right? And they were Democrats and they were conservative. So there's something to be said for that, right? There's something to be said for those things. Now, you can get into the social policy stuff here just a little bit with this by looking at the idea that she might have come up with the idea of, wouldn't it be great if everybody had a job? Wouldn't it be great if everybody had a home? Wouldn't it be great for that? Because they've got all of this dreamy energy in the 12th house, right? Now, if they had gone on the platform of everybody's going to work and everybody, which I think was actually part of it, because they were very much concerned and they were very much, I mean, the economy had kind of done a little bit of a weird turn in the mid 70s. This is where you had Iran kind of, turning off the gas pipelines, the oil pipelines. So their goals might have been stifled a little bit because they were a little too lofty, they were a little too dreamy, because they have that kind of energy, but it's also what made them so strong, right? Then you also have that opposition, that fire of Mars being in opposition to her sun. So he also knew how to kind of get her motivated, right? There's some leadership stuff here on Jimmy's side of it, to have a good person by his side. I'm not going to say a good wife, but they definitely subscribe to the you be the woman, I'll be the man, to this, or I'll be the woman, you be the man. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. And it worked for them. And based on this chart, it was a super thing for them, because it was also very comfortable, because that south node, which ends up in her 6th house for Jimmy, in conjunct to the north node, or in conjunct to the north node to Mars, in that opposition here, really just kind of lends itself to say, I'm comfortable with these roles. I'm comfortable with being your safe haven. Mars sitting here in Aquarius is a protector mode, right? It's kind of a Papa Bear type of thing, but it's also the idea of the motivator to be like, I'm going to keep you safe, right? And by the way, the Pallas Athena sitting here, the Vesta sitting here, he learned Rosalynn inside and out, and I'm not being tongue in cheek about that. He made it his life's purpose to make it about the two of them, because it's sitting in their 6th house. And the 6th house is about that safety, about that connection, right? And her being a Virgo rising, it also plays very well to that Pallas Athena placement, because it ends up on the DC line, on the descendant here, because he's in opposition to her rising sign, which basically means, like, I know my role when you are being virtuous. I know my role when I'm being, when you need to be your purity, when you need to speak your mind, and when you need to be grounded in your stuff. He's going to know that placement to it, right? He might not understand it, but he also understands sometimes you just don't do anything, right? And I think that's a pretty fair thing. So let's flip flop this. And again, the inner wheel now becomes Jimmy. I almost want to call him Jimi Hendrix. And by the way, I did cut off the top a little bit, but I want to make sure this is a little bit bigger. I want to talk about Rosalynn Carter's influence on Jimmy, because this becomes really kind of cool. I'm going to start with the same topic I ended with on the flip side of this. Taking a look at the 6th house here, her Chiron is in the 6th house, which means that she was really, this lends itself to that mental health thing that would be of interest to her, right? And what she provided to him in his 6th house was empowerment, and you go do this, right? Now, he had been the governor of Georgia. I think he had also run for senator and lost. But then he turned around and said, forget this, I'm going to become a president. This Jupiter-Uranus placement in his 6th house is the absolute I got your back. It really is. It's a super duper, like, whatever it is, we're going to get through this, right? Yeah, let's kind of go to the top of the hour here and go to the 1st house, where her Pallas Athena and Vesta are sitting in the 1st house. This is somebody that Jimmy could honestly, like, say, I need a woman's point of view here. What do you think? What's my blind spot? Like, she's somebody that can show him what his blind spot was. I think that's a great relationship builder. Super relationship builder, right? Because what you're really doing is you're allowing her to have her voice in that, or him in his voice, to be able to say, why am I kind of confused with this? In this scenario, his Saturn sits in her 2nd house, or her Saturn sits in his 2nd house, which is very much a mother figure. These two, if you follow that lifestyle, are the original switch. They would go back and forth with their roles, with their supports in one another. And again, They don't really get it. Even though her eighth house is busy, that is not consistent with her placements are not consistent with anything other than support and being able to kind of like bring to fruition a mission. But back on the mission part of it, um, take a look at where her moon and Chiron is. It ends up in his seventh house, the house of relationships, right? She was incredibly good for not only his mental health, but also his understanding about how he needed to um, get connected, right? How to be that person, right? She was a sanctuary to him. That placement means she was an absolute sanctuary to him, right? And his Lilith is sitting in the eighth house, which means that, she kind of was like, all right, I'll see your peanuts, right? Because that's what he needs. He needed somebody to let this kind of like, he could only be healed through something virtuous with that Taurus placement there, right? He could only be, like he needed like monogamy. He needed felicity. He needed somebody that was going to be able to see him through and honor him for those things. That's actually a really tough placement for men because I think men, given what they've gotten, if they have the misconception of like who they're supposed to be as a man, this could be a very non-masculine placement for them. But to her, she's just kind of like, that's cool. Let it sit in your eighth house. She has nothing conflicted to that. And it is an opposition to his moon. So he might have had some, and again, it's not a pure opposition, but there might have been some things for him where he might not have opened up. But she created a safe space because of that Chiron moon placement in the seventh house. Now to the top of the hour here. Now the Pluto is kind of when you're talking about um, a synastry chart. One of the challenges that you have with Pluto is that there's not a ton of movement. There shouldn't be a ton of movement. I mean, they're about 3 years apart, right? So let's not get over our skis and overplay that, but it ends up in the ninth house. So you can make the argument of, he's going to be naturally curious. And the fact that Pluto is in Cancer, that is about a nurturing piece to it. He has a very understanding part to it. Being born in 1927, the world was flooded with a lot of compassionate people because it wasn't going to be ostentatious. We needed to survive, so we had to take care of one another. They both have that part, right? And by the way, they are the only first lady and president combination to be born in the same city at the same place. The only ones. So they do have a simpleton style. But let's take a look at the 10th house. Oh, this is where it gets good. The 10th and the 11th house are just balls, everybody. Jimmy Carter having his son in the 12th house speaks a lot to the Mideast peace treaty, right? He also had a way of looking at, he was known as a good negotiator, but he would quote unquote give up too much all the time. This is Sun in Libra in the 12th house, by the way. He might have given up the ghost a little bit too much from time to time, but he was more about making sure that the compromise would happen. And by the way, his angle here is an 8 and a 3. Oh my gosh, he's an 11. So he's very much, and I should probably take a look at that before I start spouting off about it. But he definitely has a very good way about how he would approach things, right? He was about balance. He didn't want to necessarily just get over on people, right? He's 8 and 3. He's an 11, right? And then in that 11th house, I'll finish with the 10th house, but the 11th house, where he was a good communicator, this is where Rosalynn really freaking balanced him. I mean, really balanced him. 11th house is kind of the greater good. It's the greater world community. She was the ace in the hole for him, guys, because she was able to show the masculine and feminine, the healing dynamics. She was able to rip the Band-Aid off and say, this is the real thing. Then it's sitting right over his Mercury And guess what? He became the mouthpiece. You go be the president. I'm going to show you, I'm going to let you know why it is that people act the way they do. I'm going to let you know where these things have going, right? Um, nope, he is actually the inner wheel on this one there, Marty. So he's on the inner wheel. So his inner wheel in the 11th house is Mercury. So he was the mouthpiece to the world. He was the mouthpiece to that. And by the way, he always came off very virtuous, right? That Mercury in Virgo placement, it's a very natural setting, right? It's a very even keel conversation. It's an even keel, like, let's just do the right thing. We don't have to be super dreamy. Now, let's talk about dreams in the 10th house, because you have not only his north node in his 10th house, but it is conjunct with Venus. It is conjunct with Neptune. So you have all of this 10th house stellium energy in Leo. He wasn't going to be denied. You know, and when you think about it, okay, he was governor, you lost the senatorship. I think he lost the senatorship first and then became the governor. But he didn't give up, guys. Like, that north node sitting in your 10th house is like, you know, this is where you get adapted quotes of, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up, right? And that's Jimmy Carter's placement here. Rosalynn's placement with the sun in conjunct to Neptune, oh, forget it, man. Like, that is just super, 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 right? Um, oh yeah, his Janice, thank you for that. His book was named "It's Always a Reckoning." He had his book come out in 1995, and by the way, he wrote it. He didn't have a ghostwriter. I mean, he had an editor. I mean, every good author will have an editor, but you know, he wrote it himself. He wanted to make sure that it was what he wanted for posterity, and he also talked about how boring retirement was, and he went from slow to snail. Like, he didn't pick up steam, right? um, but he did understand that when people would look back at him, you know, history was pretty mean to him. But when you think about the things that he really did, and by the way, it was the things that you could pick on him about is that he truly, I mean, he was manipulated. And this is one of those things, and I'm not going to get into a whole Democrat Republican thing, but one of the things that Ronald Reagan ran on was the idea that he couldn't negotiate with, you know, with the Middle East. And they had a whole deal in place. So after the election, you know, the Reagan administration looks like the hero. It was actually Jim Baker that had negotiated it beforehand. They were basically like, we want to get those hostages out of there. They had it since um, early October. They actually had the agreement in place since early October. And son of a gun, guys, like, who does that? You know, Reagan, you know, whether you think he's a good president or not, or whatever the case may be, who says you need to be in capture longer because I needed to be politically expedient? Like, who does that crap, right? Well, they did that. You know, it's one of those things that I think it's, and Jimmy Carter looked like a fool because of that. And I think he really got a bad rap about it. So in 1984, he started a organization called Habitat for Humanity. It kicked off into 1986. By 1987, they were building houses. And he knew, this is how much he was a smart dude. And by the way, I firmly believe this was Rosalynn's hand, is that he would go and he set up certain things within the United States Housing Authority to basically allow for grants to be written for community-based housing to exist. He is one smart son of a bitch, and Rosalynn Carter made sure he did it. The reason why Habitat for Humanity gets its funding is for a very simple reason, because Jimmy Carter said we could help people after we leave. How many politicians do you know that rig the system so they can help others? All of them rig the system. I mean, you can do stuff like maybe flood the Supreme Court with right-wing nut jobs. That's one way, right? Just in case you get in trouble down the road for all the shit that you're trying to pull, right? Or maybe you could loosen up banking regulations so you could play monopoly with other people's donation money and then live high off the hog like that. I'll let you figure out which one did that one. Or maybe take a shot at national security stuff and loosen that up so you can free trade um, secrets, or so you can say that investigations die on the vine because the structure of how legislature has investigations hits a brick wall and then runs out of funding before they actually become self-evident. Listen, we don't do bereavement well in this country. We don't take care of our veterans, and we don't have a compassionate bone to our body when it comes to our taxes. But we'll pick another fight and we'll start another war because that's what we're good at, and that's revenue generating. And we really need to do that. We really need to take a look at that. I have done a couple of fundraisers for Habitat for Humanity. There is a group around here that basically you can donate your goods and what have you, and then they turn around and they sell it, and then it goes towards a home. I have met and interviewed people that have been the beneficiaries of those homes. And some people, yeah, you know what? They had to get their act together. They were down on their luck, whether it be financially, maybe they had too much burden too quickly. That's what I found most of the time. And Habitat for Humanity, I have met the people that it has helped. I will also tell you that I have a tie to Jimmy Carter. My mother's godmother was the first woman mayor of a town called Cohoes, New York. Her name is Virginia McDonald. She was actually put into office when her husband died, and then she took it over and had an unabashed recklessness even to make the city come into the 20th century. In 1977, she abolished the last zoning laws for interracial property ownership. Like, you could not, if you were black in 1977, you could not own property in Cohoes without a proper approval. Now, was it being enforced? I don't think so, but it was still on the books. So she got rid of stuff like that. She also helped it in 1976 become a bicentennial city. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, and it was just Thanksgiving, is I grew up sitting with this woman who was just, Ginny. She was Ginny to me. I didn't know she was the mayor of the city. I didn't know she was whatever. And she would come in and tell these stories about being the mayor. And that's just me kind of giving some background. But she was an amazing woman because she took the bull by the horns. First of all, she was a woman in a man's world. But then she would do things and say, this would be great for the city, because she had a lot of civic pride. It was a city that she was born and raised in. She was, without a doubt, one of the most patriotic people I had ever met. And our favorite thing was, she was like, I'm gonna root for the National League. You're gonna root for the American League. Because I was a Yankee and Twins fan, American League. And she was kind of old school, going, what's this DH crap, right? And we would talk about stuff like that. And we would watch the game together or something when we did. And she would always say to me, we're going to bet a new baseball bat. I mean, I'm 10, 11 years old. I'm like, a new baseball? Are you kidding me? And then I'd be like, okay, well, what happens if I, if you win? I go, which you won't. By the way, the National League won like every freaking year during my childhood. But anyways, and she said, you got to come over and do a day's worth of, lawn care. And I'm like, okay. It's a lot riding on an exhibition game, everybody. But I would come over and I would do lawn work virtually every year. And when we were done, we would go out and eat at, one of the diners or whatever, and then we would go buy a baseball bat every single year. That was just the type of person she was. So she got her lawn taken care of, and I got a baseball bat and a pretty good, meal at Smith's or something. And then on the other side of that, when she helped the city of Cohoes become the bicentennial city in 1976, she was able to go to Washington, and she had a dinner with Rosalynn Carter and Jimmy Carter, and there was a picture somewhere floating in the family archives of her meeting Jimmy Carter, and her absolute adoration for the two of them was beyond words. She lost her husband. Her husband had been elected mayor in November. He had his team put together. He died tragically um, over the holiday. And on January 2nd, they voted her in and said she's going to take over his policies. And this was at a time when the big Democratic machine was going on in New York State. And she was in the Citizens Party. The Citizens Party in upstate New York single-handedly took down Bill Smith and the Democratic machine. My mother's godmother was the reason, because she didn't give up. And when you see people like that, and she looked up to Jimmy and Rosalynn for two reasons. She used to say, that's the reason why I'm never going to get remarried, because I lost my Jimmy Carter. That's what I grew up with, guys. That's what I used to hear. And she had an admiration for Rosalynn Carter. And when Habitat for Humanity came in, she was a 67-year-old woman, and she showed up with a hammer. And I used to do her lawn work. She never lifted a finger, but she was willing to swing a hammer because she felt good for a cause. And people always kind of like ask me, like, who influences you? How did you get here? And I always say, I mean, mediums are fun to watch. They're fun to connect with. But my influences weren't mediums. I actually find most of them to be self-absorbent and kind of arrogant. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not one of them. I'm just saying. But the people that influenced me are people like comedians and people like musicians and people that would have a characteristic of them not giving up. Well, in my personal life, those were the type of people that influenced me. They were the type of people that said, you got to do the right thing, even when you've done the wrong thing, you still got to do the right thing. Oh, that's a hard one, right? The type of people that say, if this lights your soul on fire, you got to go do it. And I think about Jenny from time to time, because she's genuinely one of the most incredible people I'd ever known. And I was blessed to have her in my universe. My mother was blessed to have her as her godmother. And as we knew her family, and as we knew her, she was just this amazing soul that had a patriotism that was pure. And she looked up to Jimmy and Rosalynn in a way that I will always hold him in high regard. And I think part of me wanted to be critical of Jimmy Carter because, well, he was only a one-term president. And, well, what did he really do? He didn't get the hostages home. And then when you peel back the layers and you realize Jimmy Carter was too good to be president. Jimmy Carter would be eaten alive in today's race. Jimmy Carter was actually a beacon of what we should be looking for in our politicians. Now, I know not the hour nor the place, but I'm not going to point out some things in his current chart and what's going on in the sky, because I could very easily do that. And I'm telling you, Rosalynn's window was wide open, and that's when she left. He's coming up on his second Chiron return, which is not an easy thing to get through. And I know not the hour nor the place, but when he's reunited with Rosalynn in spirit, it'll be a very easy day for him. And like anything else in their life, she showed him the way. So the fact that she passed before him not only doesn't surprise me, it's also what their deal was. The two of them were soulmates. The two of them worked with one another on levels that the rest of us can only strive to do. I can only hope that you find your Jimmy Carter. I can only hope that you find your Rosalynn Carter, right? All right, guys. Hard taps to you guys. Thanks so much for paying attention. Go to tbrandonruss.com. Get on the email list at a minimum. Go take a look at the weekly bean. Go grab the special. I'm going to extend it to Friday. I think I'm kind of a nice guy about it. I should have taken it down because it's a cyber thing. But anyways, give you a little bit of time. You're going to get that, and then you'll get a message behind it that gives you the code that balances it out for the discount. So it's kind of a cool thing. I want to thank you guys for being part of my journey, part of my path. I will get into some fun card readings. I'm going to do some prep work because right now it looks like I am not having that video taken down. It's going to get demonetized, but whatever. I don't need your money, YouTube. I don't need your 3 cents a click, your 0.003 cents a click. They're a little ridiculous, guys. Did you know that Spotify last year made close to something like $8 billion? Billion with a B. Now, maybe it was all streaming platforms. And the average payout or the payout for all of that, like $8 billion, was something like a little over 1.5 million or 2.5 million. It's insane, guys. Like when you do the, you're like, that's like 3%. Anyways, Judith, thank you so much for acknowledging that. I appreciate you guys. Magic Mermaid, Kimmy, good to see you. Kim Marie, Kelly, yes, great and good things. Judy, good to see you as well. Janice, thanks so much for the info. I'm going to see you guys soon. Hard taps across the board, guys. More on the horizon. Stay tuned. Here we go.